Thought I'd do a video on how I got started in the machine shop business. I've had some people ask about it, and I thought I'd do one. I'm sure there'll probably be some questions at some point. I can do another video and probably answer some questions. I started out in Votech school learning how to run a manual lathe and a mill, surface grinder, vertical and horizontal mills. We ran both of those, learned how to cut threads, cut gears, just about anything manual machine that was around at the time. They had one of, and you got to spend some time learning to make things on it. We had projects that we done. The teacher was a very good teacher. He was very good with the students. I look back on it and wish I would have paid probably some more attention than what I did at the time. But when you're 16, 17 years old, you don't do that sometimes. So young guys out there, you better start paying attention to some of the teachers that tell you stuff, and listen to what they're telling you. He taught me some stuff about life, which was kind of interesting. I look back on it, I didn't see it at the time, but some comments that he made were very interesting, and I look back and now I understand what he was meant by them. I started working in just a general machine shop over the summer. He would get students jobs, so I worked in a general machine shop running a lathe, making some parts. It wasn't a CNC machine, it was a manual machine. We did some oil field type valves, and I was machining some of these oil field valve housings. So I did that for a summer. School started up. It's hard to work nights at one of these places and go to school. So, they understood, and, told me I could come back anytime. Just let them know when, I wanted to come back, and they'd, have a job for me. But at that time, I thought, man, I don't know if I really like the general machine shop. I enjoyed the machining aspect of everything. But I liked engines, race cars. At that time, I was kind of into drag racing a little bit, not much. A friend of my dad's, they drag raced. Local track here. We went out a few times and watched them race. And then he told me, a friend of my dad's told me that there's a machine shop in town looking for somebody to do tear down and clean up and disassembly and that type of stuff in an automotive machine shop. The guy's name was Jimmy Nix. He was an old time top fuel drag racer. He raced with Coletta, Garlitz, Perdome, all the old guys that you don't hardly see much of anything anymore. So I went by there, applied for a job, and, it was pretty much, he told me that, a 17-year-old kid is not going to be reliable and not show up every day, and he needs somebody reliable and somebody to show up every day. One thing my machine shop teacher had taught us was to be persistent about anything you do. So I told him, I said, well, I really, I don't really remember the exact conversation, but, I told him I'd really like it. I'll show up every day. I'll be reliable. And he said, well, I'll come back in a day or two. So I came back the next day and said, well, have you decided yet? And he says, well, no, I haven't. I hadn't really thought about it. And, this went on for a week or longer. I was going by every day after school trying to get him to hire me. And finally he said, well, you seem to be persistent enough. I'll give you a shot. So that's how I got started in the automotive machine shop. And it was greasy, nasty. The teardown stuff was, hot. A lot of it was outside. the machine shop was a lot different back then than they are today. And, a vat outside, it was, in the wintertime, they had the old soaker type vat where you would load stuff into it and let it soak overnight. You'd have to get it out and wash it outside. It was hot, cold, freezing. It was nasty. But I was persistent. Finally, he let me start doing, some machine work. It kind of started me out boring some blocks. At that time, the boring bars we had, they clamped to the top of the blocks. So, probably a lot of guys out there haven't seen those. That's the kind of boring bar we started out with. And, I bored some blocks, and, we honed them by hand with a 1/2-inch electric drill. And you hang it up in the main web once or twice, you learn real fast not to do that. I learned how to hand hone blocks. Then he got me started on balancing and doing some head work. There wasn't any CNC stuff back in the machine shop at that time. So everything you did was pretty much on a manual machine. I worked there a couple of years. There was another guy that worked there at the same time. Kind of ran the shop. His name was John Davison. He was a very sharp guy. He worked for Nix for a long time. He did helped him when Jimmy ran a Top Fuel car, and he also helped another guy named Tommy Dumble, which I went to the races with him a few times, and it was an experience. He ran a Top Fuel car. It was an old cast iron block motor, cast iron head motor. We went to Tulsa a couple of times and run some IHRA events, and they tore up a lot of parts. You learned a lot from it. It was exciting. It was for a 17-year-old kid, it was great. So I worked for him for probably 2 or 3 years. And at that point, I had a chance to go to another shop that I wouldn't say run, but it was a parts store that had a machine shop in the back. And, the guy that ran the parts store was actually run the store and stuff, but he wanted me to kind of run the shop. And, the money was a little better, and, I was at that point kind of going to be my own boss to a certain point. So I went there and worked there for probably a year and a half, and it wasn't bad. It was a pretty decent deal. It still really wasn't what I was probably looking for. And then he ended up selling the parts store and the machine shop out. He was ready to retire. The guy that bought it, it really started to go downhill at that point. And I thought, I've got to do something. I can't stay here. It's not going well. There's lots of, there's a lot of issues going on. He let a lot of the help go that worked up front, and typical deal when somebody buys a business that was successful that don't know how to run a business. So at that point, I started looking for another job. I went to another machine shop and got a job. It's a little easier to get a job once you had some experience. And I worked there for probably about 6 months, and it was terrible. It was the nastiest, dirtiest. The people that worked there it was just a bad experience. By that time, I was married to my wife, and I'd come home miserable, and I was irritable, and we talked, and I told her, I said, I can't keep working here. I'm gonna have to do something else. And there's just not a lot of places you go to the automotive machine shop stuff. And at that time, I'd had a little equipment that I'd purchased off and on, and doing a few little side jobs at home, some valve jobs, some head work type stuff for some friends of mine and a few racers. And we sat down, me and my wife, and we talked for quite a while. And she was working at the time; she had a pretty decent job. We looked at the bills we had, and she told me that if I wanted to open my own shop, that right now would be the time to do it. And she made enough money to pay the bills, but that was, paid the bills and eat, and that was about it. And she goes, you can, give it a try for a little while, and if it doesn't work out, you can always go get a job somewhere. And so that's what I did. I worked, probably 12 to 16 hours a day for 2 years, weekends. Every dime I made, I reinvested, buying, this and that for equipment, adding things to the shop. And it was getting to the point where I had picked up enough customers that I thought, we could make it at that point. And that was probably somewhere between 2 and 3 years I did that. And the job she had enough time. She was going to get to her 10 years, and they would give her some retirement at that point. So we decided that she would stay on and get her 10 years in, and then she could retire. And I was making enough at that time to basically pay the bills. So she, ended up quitting the job, started taking care of the kids, and it's kind of a deal at that point that I was still working a lot of hours trying to help her with the kids, and things were doing not great but fairly well. I was buying some equipment, and it's just hard to get started in it. Spent a lot of time in the shop, time that I will never get back from being with my kids or my wife. So some of that is a regret. Some of it is, I couldn't have made it without doing it. So it's a two-edged sword. So if you really want to succeed, you got to make sacrifices to make it work. I did a lot of, there was a local circle track stuff. I got to doing a lot of circle track stuff. I raced a 100-inch open wheel car for about 10 years. And I got a lot of customers from the circle track that I was doing motors for. It just kept growing because my stuff would run good and it was reliable. And, the business just grew from, that. Probably at one time I had probably 35 or 40 circle track cars from the local racetrack that I was doing motors for. We won multiple championships in different classes: street stocks, pro stocks, the 100-inch cars. And after I quit, they'd switched to some sprint car stuff, and I'd won some championships in some sprint car stuff, with the motors. I was doing some drag race stuff, had a couple of customers win some NHRA events in like Super Gas, or I can't remember what it was, but a couple of them ran pretty good in some of those deals. And things started getting a little bit better. Got where I was making some decent money, and at that point I could start buying better equipment. And it just grew from that. At one point I had 2 guys working for me. Started off with one. It was pretty decent. And it was going fairly well, so I hired another part-time guy, and things were going pretty good. But it gets to the point where I was having to try to take care of things for them as far as making sure, okay, we need these heads done, we need this stuff tore down. You know, I was spending 3 or 4 hours a day making sure things were getting done that needed to get done. And I wasn't able to do what I needed to do. So it makes it hard. At that point, you almost need 1 or 2 more people, somebody just to oversee the people that's working in the shop, and somebody to run the business. And I couldn't do both of them. And the one guy ended up quitting and moving to Denver. Said I wasn't paying him enough. No benefits. Which, one man machine shop, you don't get a retirement, you don't have a lot of benefits, you don't get rich at it. The other guy, that was part-time that I had, he came on full-time, and he worked until, he was a very good employee. He came to me, probably, he'd been working here, I don't remember for sure. He came to me and, mentioned that he was going to, go try to be a firefighter. And, at that time, it kind of upset me a little bit, but, I understood, you need to, he needed a retirement. He enjoyed, the firefighting thing. So he went and applied for, getting a firefighter job. He got him a firefighter job. At that point, I had hired, I didn't have anybody. I was looking for some people. I hired another kid out of Votech school. He worked several years, and, we had some issues, and I ended up having to let him go, which, it's most of the time I would say he was a good employee. I had to let him go over some issues, and then it kind of, at that point, things kind of started going downhill as far as trying to find employees. Another friend of mine had a son that wanted to get into the machine shop business. He called me and said, well, I hear you're looking for somebody. I said, well, yeah, I am. He said, well, would you give my son a chance? And I said, well, send him by, I'll talk to him. He came by, he had 0 experience in any kind of machine work, which I look back on it, and it was a huge mistake to hire him. But I needed somebody to do tear down and clean up and stuff, and it was a disaster over about a month and a half period of he couldn't clean stuff properly. It was still dirty. He would show up late, and I told him, I said, I don't mind you being late. If you're 10 minutes late, work 10 minutes over. I'm out here late every day. Just make up the time. But I'd really like for you to be on time. Then he showed up an hour late one day, and I said, you can't show up an hour late. That's just not going to cut it. He said, well, me and my wife are having problems. And I said, why don't you take a day or 2 off? You and your wife get everything sorted out, and, come back so you can start showing up on time. He showed up the next day on time. Everything was good. That was on a Thursday. Friday, he never showed up all day Friday. I didn't call him or anything. He shows up Monday like everything's okay. I handed him his paycheck and told him that was it. I can't have somebody that doesn't show up. And from that point, it kind of went downhill as far as employees. I had one guy show up and work probably a day and a half, went to lunch and never came back. I had another guy that was so inconsistent, he didn't last more than a week. And, you just can't try to run a business that way. So at that point, I just decided not to hire anybody else and just do it myself. And that's kind of where I've been for the last probably, I'd say probably the last 10 years. I've been by myself doing it. A lot less stress. and things have just been, as far as the shop goes, pretty decent. So that's kind of how I got started in the machine shop business. A few things, I went to the very first PRI show. I went to probably close to 30, I think it was 30 of them before I ever missed, or it may have been 20. It was probably about 25 before I ever missed a PRI show. There was a year that my grandson passed away. I missed that year. That was a terrible year. And then, after that, I went a few times, and then, a year or two there that I'd lost my wife, I didn't go. And, I've kind of gone back to going to the PRI show. It's not what it used to be, but it's still not a bad show to go to. I got a lot of good friends that I've known over the years, and a lot of them have retired. A lot of the business has changed a bunch, but still yet, it's a good place to go and make connections. You can put some stuff in the comments. I can try to answer some more questions. Go into a little more detail. If anyone's interested, just put some comments down there. I may do another video on it. But that's kind of the short version of how I got started in the machine shop business. Appreciate everybody watching. Sorry some of the content hasn't been what it had been. Like I said, I think in one of the other videos, Jackie and Chief, she'd been helping me do the editing, or she'd been doing the editing and stuff. So they've been so busy with trying to do their own thing that I've started trying to do my own videos. They'll get better, so bear with me on that part. The car show stuff, there'll be a video coming up pretty soon as far as finishing up all the block work on it. I appreciate everything that everybody's done for that deal. So I'll keep everybody updated on a lot of stuff, and like I said, put some comments down and I will get back with you and either do another video or answer them in the comment section, or we'll do something. But I appreciate it. Thanks very much.